All right, it's great to see you guys. It's wonderful to be surrounded by patriots. And here at the Health Freedom Expo, that's what we have. We have people who understand individual liberty, and they also understand oppression from government. What we're really dealing with right now is a deliberate effort to destroy the greatest empire of liberty the world has ever known. The United States, 241 years old since 1787 and the Constitution's ratification, is now at a pivotal point where over the next several years we will decide as a people whether we will be free or whether we will be slaves. Now, it's hard to believe that people will voluntarily become slaves. It's very hard to believe that. But time and again, history has shown us that people have either been forced into that slavery by those who create a revolution, a Marxist revolution, or they have been led into believing it's superior to freedom. Now, for those of us in this room, that's hard to believe, that you would sell out your country, that you would sell out liberty, that you would be willing to sacrifice the Constitution, you would be willing to sacrifice children so that they could not survive in a free state, that you would be willing to give up everything for authoritarianism, to be ruled by dictators, to be ruled by people who don't respect the rule of law, to be ruled by a corrupt cabal of people. And yet, what do we have ruling this country today? What are we looking at? Are we looking at people who love the Constitution, who, like George Washington, believed in the declamation of power, not assuming power but giving it up? Or are we talking about people who are usurpers, who are trying to take more and more power, who are dissatisfied with the power given them under the Constitution, and who instead want to take away your liberty, to choose something other than what they want? And what they want is what's good for themselves. That's what we're dealing with. And we can change this. We represent a majority. It's a silent majority by and large. And it has to become vocal. We have very little time. You know, they talk about existential threats, right? Existential threats. There is no greater existential threat to us than socialism today. That is the greatest threat to the survival and success of liberty in America. It's socialism. Let's take a look at the agenda that they have for us. Exactly. Now, in years, just 15 years ago, even less than that, if a Democrat was running for office on a platform that looked like that, that Democrat would be doing absolutely everything in his or her power to flee from this agenda and to insist on another agenda, just because electability was at stake, right? But notice that this cannot be a mistake. This has to be intentional. It has to be intentional because they do absolutely nothing to change it. When you take a look at the economy, inflation at over 8.5%. When people go to the grocery store, they're making it very hard for people to live. Roughly 20% of the population can't pay their bills monthly. Everybody is squeezed. Everybody's hurting. Does Biden do anything about that? Not a thing. Does the Democrat leadership in Congress do anything about it? Not a thing. In fact, they do what's worse. They're the source of this problem because they have passed so many spending bills. We started out with a $4.5 trillion budget. They have, in a year and a half, doubled it. We now have a $10 trillion budget. They passed a $1.9 trillion bill right off the bat. That was supposedly the American Rescue Plan. They passed a $1.2 trillion bill that became the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. They passed $800 billion in the falsely labeled Inflation Reduction Act, and they wiped out, at your expense, at least $500 billion to $1 trillion of student loan debt. This is reckless spending by any sense of reality. More money is being pumped into the economy by the federal government in a shorter period of time than ever in American history, by far, than ever in world history. We are the biggest spending government in the history of the world. When you have too many dollars chasing too few goods, what do you get? Inflation. The inflation we see now at 8.5% is the beginning of this, unfortunately. It's the beginning of this. And then we have an epidemic of crime. We have George Soros-backed district attorneys and prosecutors all over the country, some 75 of them, paid for by George Soros. One of them, in my neck of the woods in Virginia, Buddha Biberaj, her campaign coffers look like this: $944,000 from Soros and about $25,000 from everybody else. She's the Commonwealth's attorney. In each of these 75 jurisdictions, which covers 72% of the United States, they have an anti-incarceration agenda operating. They won't prosecute criminals. They won't put them in jail. They put them back on the street. So crime is insane in Chicago because you have a Soros-backed district attorney in Chicago. Last name is Fox. She won't prosecute crime. Now that's an obstruction of justice. That's illegal. She's sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the state of Illinois. Does she do that? No. Why isn't she being prosecuted? Why isn't she removed? And then when you saw in 2020 all the Antifa and BLM rioting all over, where were the police? Where was the establishment of law and order? Why did they allow the looting, businesses to be burned down, people to be assaulted, people to be murdered, over 500 police killed? Where was the response necessary to establish law and order? We have a crime epidemic. Inflation, runaway inflation. Gas prices that are going to hit $6 a gallon. They completely destroy their goal. Their expressed goal is insane. Completely destroy the fossil fuel industry in the United States within 10 years of Biden's election. That's Biden's proposal. That's the Democrat leadership's proposal. The Green New Deal. The birth child of AOC. All right, what is the Green New Deal? Well, the truth of the Green New Deal was spoken by AOC's chief of staff in a meeting he had in July of 2019 with the governor's staff on climate change in Washington State. And what did he say there? They were all gathered together. They're quite excited. The idea of destroying fossil fuels. We're going to have a pollution-free world. Just the United States. China will continue to pollute massively, and then also India. And don't worry about that, because even though that's 95% of the pollution in the world, we'll focus on the 5% here in the United States. And we'll destroy everybody's jobs and the whole economy to show that we won't pollute at all. So they're there gathered together, and then something interesting happened. The chief of staff of AOC said, hey, you know what? You guys are all obsessed about this environmentalism aspect of this. No. This is how we get socialism in America. And he said it overtly. And it's even recorded. This is how we get socialism to America. The Green New Deal is a Trojan horse for the delivery of socialism. We are all being manipulated. We are being manipulated by people who are pulling variously our strings and telling us that oh, the world's going to be better off for you because we're going to do this. We promise this. We're going to get rid of all student loan debt. We're going to change the environment. It's going to be better for you all. But the actual implementation and all the bureaucratic agencies, what are we talking about? We're talking about a far left agenda. This administration has put as the heads of all of these agencies radicals who are dedicated to Marxism. When they go about destroying our country, when they go about allowing our youth to be indoctrinated with critical race theory, which is Marxism, when they allow our youth to be confused as to their genders, telling children who are incapable of making a decision, sexualizing them, making them sexually conscious, and then having them elect when they're preschool and in the juvenile years what their gender is going to be. Is that insane? And they're doing it excluding parents from the decision making. Why are they doing this? This is not something that happened overnight. This is long in the making. Why are they doing this? Why are they making our kids hate each other, hate themselves, hate their country, hate free enterprise? Why are they making our kids undecided as to what their gender is? Am I really a boy? And why are they doing this? And why are they mutilating our children, right? Why are they taking children and saying, okay, you know what? We're not going to tell your parents, but we understand you, little girl, think you're a little boy, and we're going to show you how you can become a little boy. Oh yeah? Biology isn't that simple. A little girl can pretend to be a boy, and she can think she's a boy, but she can't become a biological boy. You can mutilate a little girl. You can have a mastectomy that prevents her from ever breastfeeding. You can change her organs so that she emulates a boy, but you cannot make her a boy. That's a fraud. That's a fraud. So why do you do this? Why is this sickening mutilation of both boys and girls? Why are we allowing that to happen? In the Commonwealth of Virginia, there are 3 hospitals, and those hospitals perform these operations on kids. And there are hospitals around the country performing these operations on kids. This is mutilation. This is child abuse. So is critical race theory. So is teaching a child to hate their country, hate their parents, hate the free enterprise system. What in the world are we allowing the schools to do, and how did they do it? How did they get to this point? How did they sneak in this agenda? How did Biden sneak in this agenda? It isn't just a new agenda. It's been in the works forever. If we take a look at things, we have an example of the kind of betrayal I'm talking about. This is authoritarianism. And in my book, The Authoritarians, I talk about the rise of socialism in America from actually the antebellum South, before the Civil War, all the way up to the present. In the Civil War, and this is an irony you'll see, in the Civil War, right before the Civil War started, the leadership of the Confederacy-to-be was panic-stricken because the abolitionists in the North were hitting a chord that was so sensitive. They were showing them that Thomas Jefferson stood for liberty and individual liberty and was an opponent of slavery, contrary to the 1619 Project and what's being taught now. He included in the Declaration of Independence a 168-word paragraph that condemned slavery, that said that individuals from a foreign land, Africa, are entitled to the same rights as we are. When you read that, that's the meaning of it. He said that the institution of slavery was brought to this country by the crown and that it was an evil. And he wanted it to end. He, a slaveholder, wanted it to end. Wanted a political solution that would have ended it for the entire country so no one would go bankrupt because they would all have the same economic disadvantage in freeing those slaves. But he wanted it to come to an end, and he knew it was evil. Now he's painted as a racist and said that you can't believe anything Jefferson said. One of the most brilliant minds in the history of the Enlightenment era, certainly the foundation, one of the critical foundations of liberty in America, whose vision in the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence is the definition of what it means to be an American, that all men are created equal. Men only, you say? Did he mean that? No, the language of the time included women and men when they used the term men. In fact, he wrote about that. Okay, where is that? Where is humankind explained to be the meaning of that sentence in the Declaration of Independence? Oh, we've written it out of history, and yet that is in his biography. Humankind. And the rest of the world understood it at the time. All men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Endowed by their Creator. Our rights as Americans come from God. They don't come from the state. What is the perception of Biden? What is the perception of the authoritarians ruling our country? That your rights are given to you by the state and that they can be taken away from you by the state. What is it that led to the mass deprivation of rights of Canadian citizens by Justin Trudeau? It was an act of Parliament, an emergency act of Parliament. Why? Because in their Charter of Rights, there is no recognition that our rights come from God. There is no recognition that they're unalienable. The rights of Canadians come from the state and can be taken away by the state. Not so here. And yet, what has the Biden administration done? It has taken away our rights. It has done it without due process of law. When it comes to the plague, when it comes to the epidemic, you were ordered to be masked. You were ordered to be double masked. You were ordered to be triple masked. The CDC kept ordering us, put on more masks. I guess eventually you keep putting on enough, you suffocate yourself and die, and then you're not vulnerable to getting the virus, right? Well, that's insane. Why? Because there's no sound scientific evidence that a nanoparticle can be stopped by threads. There's no evidence of that. In fact, I've talked to many immunologists and epidemiologists over the course of this pandemic, and they're universally of the same view on this, that it's equivalent to, that wearing a mask is equivalent to trying to stop mosquitoes from entering your yard by putting up a chain link fence. Okay? Mosquitoes are teeny tiny things, chain link fence like this, and you're going to be very unsuccessful because they're going to get through the fence, right? So this was a propaganda campaign for which there was no evidence, and yet the whole nation was made to panic. Why? To get us ready to be sheep. Because if you're afraid, if you're losing money, if you think tomorrow is going to end in a miserable situation, you're vulnerable. And you begin to doubt your ability to do for yourself what is in your own self-interest. And then who do you look for? Oh, I'm over here. I'm Joe. I'm Joe Biden. I've got an answer for you. Give me your liberty, and I'll give you a welfare check. Oh, it's going to bankrupt the country? Oh, Margaret Thatcher said the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. Exactly. That is the problem with socialism. But the problem with socialism is a lot worse than that. Because as you become a socialist state, you take away people's liberties. Take away their liberties on the masking thing. You say everybody in the country has to be vaccinated. You condemn people who are not vaccinated. You say that only the people who are not vaccinated are transmitting the virus. Well, that's all a lie. Everybody's transmitting the virus. You say that, oh, one vaccine is going to stop this whole thing. Oh, yeah? Well, apparently one vaccine didn't work at all. Because 80% of us have gotten COVID. And we have natural immunity. And that's why we're in the endemic phase. Not the vaccine. So we were lied to. We were made to panic. Because you are vulnerable. You're not independent. You're not strong. You're not willing to fight for freedom. What are they doing right now? Well, they're destroying the whole economy to keep you in a state of panic. And they're also destroying your ability to feed yourself and to to pay for gas, and they're doing all these things. And this is intentional. This is not an accident. This is intended. This is how they bring about socialism. This is how they bring about socialism in the greatest empire of liberty in the world. This is how it happens. We can't let it happen. We are a free people. We mean to be free. You don't want your children growing up as slaves. You don't want your children to be invalids. You don't want some idiot in school behind your back telling your son that he's a girl, or your daughter that she's a boy. You want to control the upbringing of your children, and you have a constitutional right to control the upbringing of your children. And they're violating that right. And they violate the rights of servicemen when they kick them out because they didn't get the vaccine. And they're violating nurses and doctors and policemen and all over the country. They've violated these people's rights, and they've kicked them out of their jobs, all because they don't care about us. They don't care about our daily lives. They don't care about our children. In fact, they want to ruin our children, because if they make every child a dependent in the future, they have absolute power. And that's what this is about. No one is worse than Anthony Fauci on that. There's an article here. Take a look at Dr. Fauci's wonderful record. Now, let's really think about this, because Dr. Fauci is one of the greatest betrayers of our country in history. There has been one cover-up after another about this. In 2014, he was then working with EcoHealth and with Barrick at the University of North Carolina to get to the communist Chinese in Wuhan gain-of-function research. He began as far back as then. He was working with them, getting them millions in funding, and going through these entities to get the funding to them. Millions went to the Wuhan lab. The Wuhan lab is under the direct control of the People's Liberation Army. It is a CCP enterprise. And that enterprise has as one of its missions creation of biological weapons. So what Fauci did was give the means to create a bioweapon to the greatest enemy of the United States and of freedom in the world, the communist Chinese. That alone is reprehensible. That alone is reprehensible, but it gets worse with Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci also sold us out because he ensured that they had the means to create the virus. He had a human cell line moved from the Department of Defense's research agency, referenced there, and sent to the Wuhan lab. He had research on gain-of-function performed at EcoHealth and at the University of North Carolina so that they could transform that into a virus that is directed to people. It wasn't created in nature. It was created in the lab. The evidence is overwhelming of that. Just ask Rand Paul. Now, when it comes to this whole sequence of events, despite executive orders, even from Obama, to cut it out, he went ahead and got the money to them anyway. And what's going on here? This is evil writ large. This is the equivalent of a Joseph Mengele. This person has betrayed our country and has caused the world to suffer millions and millions of deaths. And why is that? As early as 2017, he had an interview. And in that interview, they asked him, they said, well, isn't this gain-of-function research that the NIAID is supporting in different parts of the world, isn't that risking the creation of a pandemic? And he said, we have to take some risks in order to advance scientific research. Oh yeah? And then he has patents, you know. And we know that he's making millions off of these patents and that it spiked when the vaccines came out. We don't have the evidence yet because they're hiding it about precisely how much money he's getting and where it's coming from. But we know that he's profited off of this enterprise. We know of his connections with some of the leading people in industry around the world. And we know that he is, even to this day, advancing this cause. It was just a week ago that he approved another $600,000 to go to EcoHealth, to go back to the Wuhan lab. All right, these are actions that are unacceptable by any rational measure. And yet, this administration keeps him in place. Keeps him there. This administration, when you look at Nancy Pelosi, right? Blithering idiot. When you look at Nancy Pelosi, you have a situation there where we have an Eric Swalwell, a person who fraternized and a little more with the enemy, right? He's on the Intelligence Committee. They keep him on the Intelligence Committee. How can that be? How can that be? Only if you hate this country, only if you're willing to destroy it, is this possible. This agenda is nihilistic. These people running our country today are trying to destroy it. They're trying to destroy it. You say, how can that be? Well, the evidence is overwhelming, right? I mean, it's overwhelming. No one but an idiot would think that they're really working very hard to help us because the evidence is so strong that they're hurting us. Well, again, if you're going to have transformational change, that's the language of Chuck Schumer. If you're going to have a difficult spot until the transition's finished, that's Joe Biden. The transformational change, what are we talking about? Transformational change. Transformational change from a republic with a limited government, with protection for individual rights, to a socialist state, an unlimited government with no protection for individual rights. That's where we're headed unless we take dramatic steps now to reverse it and go in the other direction. So what do we do? What do we do? Well, in my case, I have fought 37 years against this. I fought the bureaucracy of the federal government for 37 years. I've won 8 times over the FDA. And yet, even with that, the threat is now overwhelming. I'm kind of like the kid who put his hand in the dike, but then I didn't see the giant monster come along that removed the dike. And so I'm going to be swept away with all of us unless I do something. I've been going around the country for over a year, beginning actually in the Health Freedom Expo a year ago, telling people, hey, look, run for school board, make a difference, participate in this. And over again, I've been asked the same question, which is, well, okay, but what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to do something. So I've established an exploratory committee for the United States Senate to run against. And my hope is that by the end of March, that we'll raise $1 million. Knock on wood, after 3 weeks announcing this exploratory committee, we've raised $178,000. But we need all of your help. And I don't care what it is, $25, $100, $1,000, please $1,000. But without that kind of financial support, we're not going to be able to do this. Because why? Because we're up against Goliath. I'm David here. I'm up against Goliath. $51 million Tim Kaine. But what I have that he doesn't have is integrity. And what I have that he doesn't have is a love for country more than self. And what I have that he doesn't have is a willingness to be relentless, to fight for you, to fight for our country, to get rid of inflation, to get rid of crime, to get rid of this whole anti-American movement in the schools, to get rid of this CRT agenda, to get rid of this woke sexual orientation agenda. Leave our kids alone. They've got it hard enough growing up, becoming teenagers. Why is the school now involved in guiding them, grooming them Get out of here. Come on. We need to have a school that teaches reading, writing, and arithmetic and leaves our kids alone. Let their parents decide these things. We've got religion, you know. We have freedom of religion in this country. It's our own mores derived from religion that ought to guide our conduct. And when we give our kids to the school, we don't give them away at the schoolhouse gate. We possess rights over them even while they're at school. The Constitution has recognized that. But anyway, to make a long story short, we have got to fight for freedom. This is the critical moment in our history. If we don't do it now, we're going to lose it. We're going to lose it, and it's going to be very hard to get back. If you didn't want to actually have a revolution in America, then you've got to act now. Because every agency of the federal government is now dominated by far left radicals. Every agency, every department of the government is dominated by far left radicals. Everybody who's in the military knows this. Everybody who is in any of the agencies who was there before this administration knows that there's been a radical shift. The direction is uniform, it's overwhelming, it's to create socialism in America. We have to recognize it frankly. And if we do, we can save this country. And if we recognize the urgency, we can act now. And we can't sit on the sidelines anymore. I can't. And I can't be a hypocrite. I can't tell you to fight for your country and then go back home and sit on the couch and have some of those strange chips that he sells. But, you know, I can't do that. I've got to get out there. I've got to make a difference. I have to fight for my country. And with your help and your support, we can do this thing. And if I get in there, what would I do? Well, I'll tell you. There'd be an endless number of pieces of legislation that I would introduce to tear this nonsense down. What does that mean? That means opening the spigots for oil and gas production in the United States and ensuring that gas prices go down to $2 a gallon. And I mean making that a national priority to be energy independent and to get this nation back operating with the most successful and vibrant economy possible. Because we must be the greatest nation on earth. It's not an option. If we're going to be free in an environment with dogs like Xi Jinping, with those in Iran, with North Korea, they are threatening our survival. And if we are weak like this Biden is weak, then they're going to eat our cake and more. Amen. So we've got to rise to the occasion, and that means being domestically strong. It means being energy independent. It means wiping out inflation. How do you wipe out inflation? Very simple, believe it or not, but it takes a little while to have an effect. But we showed this during the Reagan administration, and we showed this even in the Kennedy administration. You cut tax rates, individual and corporate tax rates, significantly, so that you fuel private investment and innovation and productivity. That means more supply. You also get rid of regulations that impair businesses from being productive. And you use enterprise zones to encourage even further tax reductions for productive activities and manufacturing in this country. If you focus on helping people make it themselves, they will make it themselves the way they want to. And that will benefit us all. Adam Smith said, it's not by the benevolence of the butcher or the baker that you receive your meat and your bread, but by his pursuit of his own self-interest. And that indeed is the case. We built this empire not on government planning. Government planning never works. Never. Government planning is always worse than what you decide is in your own best interest. If I tell you there's a one-size-fits-all Medicare plan for you, you look at that and say, oh yeah, I'm not one-size-fits-all. Have you seen my neighbor? Okay, I don't look like my neighbor. My neighbor's completely different than I am. I need a tailored approach. What are all these restrictions on the practice of medicine? Why are they drumming out of existence all of these practitioners who said early in the pandemic, if you get the disease, get ivermectin, get hydroxychloroquine. And you know what? Those things worked. But they were a threat to this government planned solution. which was 100% vaccination. At first it was 60% vaccination. Then Fauci said, no, 80% vaccination. Oh, 80% vaccination and wear 3 masks. Oh, don't go out on Thanksgiving. Stay home. Don't go out on Christmas. Oh, your relative has COVID and is in the hospital. They have to stay there. Don't touch them. Don't go near them. Don't let them die in isolation. The cruelty, the barbarity. Solutions in medicine come from your doctor working with you, your healthcare provider working with you, coming up with a tailored solution. Freedom of choice needs to dominate this relationship so you get the best care for you. If you don't want the care, it's not the best care for you. You need to receive the care that you want. And if that had been done, if we had a free and open environment in the healthcare industry in this country, we would have had hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin all over the United States. We would have saved tens of thousands of lives. Worldwide, we would have saved millions of lives. Instead, we've got this joke that's called the vaccine, right? And everybody knows it now because, gee, what are we up on? We're on our 4th booster, so we're going to have another 675 boosters to go. That's all. Every person is, it's a wonder they don't have someone knocking at your door and saying, oh, you want to go outside? Here, quick, give you a little boost. Boost every time you move. You want to go to the restaurant? Let's get a boost. Remember, they tried to do that. People just didn't accept it. You couldn't go anywhere without getting proof of your vaccination. They wanted a national vaccine card that would be used like it was in New York as a means by which to prove that you were eligible to live. You want gas? Vaccine card. You want to eat? Oh, you got to have that vaccine card. Look, that's not freedom of choice. That is a brilliant design to have socialism, to have total control over the population. We rejected it. The population rejected it. People are not stupid. They think that we're so stupid that they can tell us, they can promise us the moon and you'll think you're going to get it. They can tell you, okay, yeah, you know what? The moon, it's available and it's yours if you vote for me. If you vote for me, you get the moon. For you personally. It comes right down to your house. This pie in the sky promising is unrealistic. We have to be realistic. But what we know works is freedom. We know liberty works. We know that the Founding Fathers had it right on the money. And we know that if we return to that, we can expect what it has brought us in the past, which is freedom and prosperity and the wealthiest empire of liberty in the world. My goal is to be relentless in pursuit of that. My goal is to set everyone free, to make sure that government does nothing unless someone is injured, and then only if there's proof sufficient to satisfy the Constitution for the government to act. If there's no injury, what is the government doing? We ought to get rid of the FTC completely, right? We ought to get rid of FDA's health claims regulations. Why? There's no exception of the First Amendment carved out for the FDA. Why is the FDA regulating speech in the marketplace? Why is the FDA censoring en masse truthful nutrient disease relationship claims? Why is that happening? This is grotesque government. This is a situation where these regulatory commissions are operating outside of the Constitution's limits on power. They use means that are unconstitutional, and they're violating our rights. All right. There are so many horribles, as you see. I tried to cover a large number of them. I haven't even touched the surface. They're doing so much so fast, and that's such in the wrong direction. And so what I commit to you to do is this. If you keep your pledge to me that you will help me do this, I will keep my pledge to you that I will be unremitting and relentless in pursuit of constitutional America, in pursuit of liberty in America, in pursuit of the rule of law, in pursuit of individual liberty, to protect it and to reestablish our country as an empire of liberty. We can be the greatest nation on earth. We have been the greatest nation on earth. Our day is not over. Our day is beginning, because if you want to talk about being woke, well, talk about awakening the spirit of liberty in America, rekindling the sacred fire of liberty, and showing the government what we can do as a free people. We can be the wealthiest nation on earth. Every person can enjoy an opportunity society. We can be the greatest nation. We can stand as a beacon of liberty. We can show the world what it means to be free. We can be proud of ourselves again. We can do what is necessary to make future generations enjoy liberty. We are not slaves. We weren't meant to be slaves. We tried to destroy slavery and we supposedly defeated it with the 13th Amendment. And now it's back again? And you mean the whole country is going to be a slave? And you mean that the government is going to be the slave master? No way. Not here in America. Not now. Let's end it here. Now. Thank you.